been almost 5 months since the election and more than 2 months since the inaugural, and I still can't believe that Joe Biden is president. But then I thought, is he president? Or maybe the more important question is anybody president? Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, on Insanity Rap, which is a daily column I write for PJ Media, I wrote a huge, 1,600-word piece on Monday with a headline, "One of our presidents is missing." And I just detailed how much this president just isn't there. Bill, I want to start with you. Andrew Malcolm is a longtime conservative columnist, really good guy. He noticed something that I don't think anybody else had noticed. Let me read this to you from his column earlier this week. He said, "You saw much media attention last week on Biden's exclusive network interview with a handpicked former Bill Clinton aide." That would be George Stephanopoulos. "It was taped Wednesday, but not broadcast until Thursday. What you likely missed in the avalanche of adulation was a tiny italic note on ABC's transcript, edited for clarity." They didn't edit Biden's stuff for time. They didn't edit it to fit in a commercial break. They edited it for clarity because apparently the president of the United States can't make his thoughts, I realize that's a bit of a presumption, known with clarity to a former Clinton aide like George Stephanopoulos. Bill, I've been joking by calling him President Porchlight, as in Porchlight is on nobody's home. Have I been too kind?
Happy to take this particular question because I spent 25 years of my life as a professional editor in Hollywood. I just edited TV shows. I edited stuff for Discovery Channel and regular talk show for 5 years. So I know what editing for clarity means. The honest answer, and sometimes it is painful to have to be honest, but the honest answer, Steve, is that we don't really know how much editing had to be done.
Exactly.
Whenever I make edits to like a Moving Back to America show and just pull things up, tighten things up, I don't have a time limit that I'm up against, so I'm not editing it for time. I'm editing it for clarity. Rarely I will have to move something around where I may have made a point here and then gone off on somewhere else and finished or made a similar point over here, and I might need to move those two things together, and that makes the presentation clearer. Now, as a person who's edited an awful lot of this stuff, those kind of things are, I think, good faith editing decisions. Somebody makes a point, God knows if anybody's prone to this, I am, just wander off, I remember I was thinking about that the other day.
Every time.
But when you're basically taking 2 points and you're tightening them up, moving them together, that's editing for clarity. However, I have also had to edit people who did not make a lick of sense at all. None. Somebody would ask a question and I had to construct an answer that at least made it sound like the person had some vague idea. Now that can be either they don't have a clue as what they're saying, or maybe they will go on and on and on. And no, it's no longer a good faith kind of, we'll just tighten this up. Now it really is genuinely a question of they're taking the dog for the walk and they're not coming back. And so the strictly honest answer to your question about a note saying edited for clarity would depend on how much editing they did. Now, with all of that said, I have found, needless to say, that Biden, I think the greatest piece of election fraud was that Joe Biden was never, ever really put on the spot. He never, ever had to face questions. I think he was the actual fraud. But when I saw him reading his prepared speech a couple of weeks ago, and he's walking down the aisle towards, through the Hall of Flags towards the podium, people were saying, is he going to get through the speech? And I'm thinking, is he going to make it down the hall?
Yeah.
Just his physical infirmity was really quite alarming. And as a person who reads from a teleprompter for a living, and somebody who's watched a lot of presidents reading from teleprompters, I find repeatedly, look, I hate to pull the expert card, but this is work I've been doing for 25, 30 years. I know this stuff well. I have often thought that he is absolutely lost and is not just a question of he's off the script or so on. I've seen many instances where I was fully convinced he really was simply mouthing words that he didn't know the meaning of. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on this one, Steve. If I had to bet my life on it, I would say that the person that we think is the president of the United States is not the president in any meaningful way in terms of our assumption of him being a leader who is dictating orders rather than somebody who is receiving orders. And everyone is allowed to make mistakes and verbal flubs, but him referring to President Harris, the number of times that he has, if he'd done it once, okay, he's in a debate or he's okay. But that particular mistake he has made so many times that I find that to be one of many alarming signs.
Normally I wouldn't read very much into the whole edited for clarity thing, except we saw it during the campaign when he was campaigning from his basement up until 9, maybe even 10 in the morning, that his staff would release these videos that he had made where they had all the time in the world to put these things together.
All the time in the world, and they still looked appalling.
Exactly.
And a better question, just to go to your a bigger point, Steve, is how come we haven't seen the president of the United States taking questions in real time? In other words, just the fact that the only comments that we've heard from Joe Biden are comments that have been edited to some degree alone should be an indication that there's something fishy going on, because if he was standing up there taking questions, even if they were puff questions, which they know they would be, that'd give us a much better idea of what the mental state of Joe Biden really is. But we haven't seen that. And that's unprecedented, if you'll pardon the expression.
Indeed. He's supposed to have his first press conference this week, I believe on Thursday, the 25th of March. We'll see what happens. I'm on pins and needles, but I bet nothing like his chief of staff is right now. Scott, let's go to you. Daniel Greenfield, the conservative columnist and reporter, raised a good question. This is what he wrote on Sunday, I believe. He said, Biden's face is everywhere, but there's no real sign that he's actually running anything. Instead, the Biden administration seems to be exactly the kind of mess that the 25th Amendment was designed to prevent, in which a non-functional president is the figurehead for the cabinet members and the special interests who are actually calling all the shots. Do you think Greenfield's reading too much into that, into the news we're seeing, or maybe I should say not seeing, Scott? Or do you think he's nailed this?
I think anytime that you're absent from the public eye for a stretch of time, and he's not the first president who's done this, then there's speculation about why is it that he's not out there. And in the modern era, so to speak, we have become used to having 24/7 news coverage, and we expect that the president will be ever present on our TV screens making some sort of pronouncement or another. So if he doesn't show up, by default, it's assumed something must be wrong. The way I evaluate a presidency is a little different, and I really don't care how much the president appears in public or how much he says or how clumsy he is at saying it, frankly. It is, what is he accomplishing? Is his leadership of his team enabling the accomplishment of his stated goals? And that should be more concerning, frankly, to most conservatives and Republicans, is the speed with which the Biden administration has been able to accomplish some things that are counter to what the conservatives had voted for back in November. And so, you evaluate the success of an organization, the success of a team, the success of a company, not by whether you think that the leader of that organization is a sharp guy or not, but what actually happens during the time that he's in leadership. Now, you can argue that Kamala Harris is running the whole thing, that there's that his cabinet is running the whole thing, that there's some guy at the DNC who's the marionette puppet master and making it all happen. But whatever the case, the Biden administration is moving with some alacrity to accomplish its goals, and that should be of more concern, I think, than whether we think he's nuts or not. During the course of the campaign, there was a lot of talk about this guy losing his marbles, and everybody thought he was going to collapse in a debate, and he didn't collapse in a debate. I mean, he's not the slickest guy with turning a phrase, but he did okay. And so I think that to me, is kind of a distraction from the legitimate concerns of policy and the direction that the country is going, although it does make an interesting parlor game.
It does that, indeed, and it certainly keeps me busy as I'm collecting my news stories to write about every day. What gets me is not that there's some secret person pulling the marionette strings, or not that Kamala Harris is actually running things behind the curtain or any of that. It's that he's doing a lot of things very quickly, often seemingly randomly. Pissing off China, banning the Abraham Accords, cozying back up to Iran. Things that are basically not so much pro-Biden or pro-Democrat, but just anti-Trump. We're just going to undo anything Trump did, even the good stuff. And it's the seeming rush and randomness of this administration its first 2 months that makes me think there's no firm hand on the rudder. And what Biden does or says today is just determined by the most recent person in his cabinet or his most recent czar appointee got his ear. We've got a similar situation here in Colorado with our governor, who seems to very sincerely believe the last thing he was told. The 25th Amendment, I think, is very interesting. I don't think it's a very good amendment, or at least a not very well written amendment. It was written in a rush after the John Kennedy assassination, when there was a legitimate fear that what if Kennedy had only been incapacitated? You know, we just had one almost near nuclear showdown with the Soviet Union the year before with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there was a real concern. Who has the authority to retaliate against a Soviet first strike if the president is brain dead and the vice president might not have all that authority? But as it's written, the 25th is basically a legalized coup against a sitting president. I'm not always very comfortable with that. That said, the Democrats are in a bit of a pickle if the president is as incapacitated as he seems to be, at least on some days. And that right now they have a friendly, moderate-seeming face that they can put up in front of some very radical policies. If they have to pull him out, if they have to use the 25th Amendment, then Kamala Harris, a known fairly radical Democrat, becomes the Democrats' public face. I don't know if they can afford that. I bet they know the answer, though. The answer is no. That is your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Just a quick reminder that content like this needs sponsors like you. So if you've been watching these shows for free, go to BillWhittle.com. We'd love to have you on board. Hit the Join Now button or just make a one-time donation. Any support is very welcome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.